Absolutely my pleasure. So today we're investigating Pete Hegseth, the obscure Fox News weekend host nominated to become the Secretary of Defense for Donald Trump. Why was he picked? Is he qualified? Will the Senate confirm him? The Pentagon is a vast bureaucracy that controls an annual budget of nearly $1 trillion a year and employs nearly 3 million people around the world stationed at over 1,000 overseas military installations and countless more here in the United States. The Pentagon is the second largest employer on planet Earth, and if you include subsidiary contracting firms, it's the biggest. In addition, the Pentagon controls military academies as well as 4 separate intelligence agencies. Considering all that, is Hegseth, a veteran but with no relevant administrative experience, out of his depth? We are posing that big question to Michael Maloof, former security policy analyst in the Office of the Secretary of Defense. He has almost 30 years of federal service in the U.S. Defense Department and as a specialized trainer for border guards and special forces in select countries of the Caucasus and Central Asia. Michael, thanks for joining us here on the TMI show.
Well, thank you, Manila and Ted, for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for joining.
So Pete Hegseth, what was your reaction when you first heard about this pick?
They could have picked you, Mike, but they picked this schmuck over here.
No, he's got experience. They couldn't pick him.
Oh, that's true.
I would have respectfully declined, but no, it was a surprise. But it depends upon what Trump was looking for. He was looking for somebody who not only had the experience, but the thing is, and someone who's a junkyard dog, if you will, to get to the bottom of the wokeism that has now penetrated the defense establishment and the DEI nonsense that we're seeing. I recall one time the Russians published a comparison between the recruiting of their people and the Americans. They showed special forces being trained, jumping through hoops of fire, being slugged around, bare chested, and jumping out of airplanes. And the one that is really memorable in my mind is the one of the cartoon showing a child of 2 military couples who were both females, and this was their notion of preparedness and military readiness, and it failed. And the Russians used that so readily to demonstrate the comparisons between our services. The image out there, what I'm getting at, I guess, is that the image of our military is not the best. Secondly, preparedness. We have some real crack stuff. We got high technology, but one EMP can really undo it all. And we don't have the military forces; they're not trained. We don't have the people who are well trained to deal with the common realities that we see on the battlefields today, namely how the Russian military fights, and they have some technology that we would like to have, but I have been trying to get, but cannot achieve, and that's the hypersonic missiles. And I think that this is serious. We don't have a defense against that. And in terms of our Navy,
knows all about that, though, right, Mike? I mean, he's a
brainiac. This is the thing. I think what I'm building up to is can he deal with trying to change this entire thing internally, and deal with people who are well ensconced. They have their own rice bowls. It's like in the intelligence community. Tulsi Gabbard's going to have the same challenge. And now you also have another relatively inexperienced military guy who's going to be the national security advisor, Mike Walls, a commendable background, Green Beret, but do any of them bring strategic vision to their positions? I don't see that. But you can be a quick learner. Hegseth is a very smart guy. He's motivated. He's got
But is that
ideas.
enough? I mean, I think about like
No,
really
it's not
brilliant.
enough.
Robert McNamara was absolutely brilliant, and the job defeated him.
Yes, it did.
And
But I would also
same thing
point
with
out,
Rumsfeld.
well, I worked under Rumsfeld, and believe me, Hegseth is no Rumsfeld. But in terms of thinking, in terms of influence in the establishment, what I see are a few things. Number one, the current Secretary of Defense, a retired general, lacks that strategic vision.
Right.
And he's a general. And the problem with nominating military people with former military backgrounds to this particular job is they don't necessarily bring to the fore within the interagency establishment the national security policies that are essential. Inevitably, it competes with the State Department. Now, one thing that's interesting here is that you got three people with military backgrounds: Gabbard, you have Walls, and you have Hegseth, all with firm military backgrounds. They're young. They're recently in the fray themselves. So that in terms of determining what national security policy is going to be, will be in competition with what the State Department has in mind in terms of its foreign policy and national security prerogatives. I saw this battle. It was a out and out, knock down, drag out, open battle between Rumsfeld and Powell when he was Secretary of State. It took all that the National Security Advisor, Condoleezza Rice, all that she could do to keep them separated from duking it out physically.
Really?
Because they were so adamant in their positions of prerogatives. And ultimately, Rumsfeld won out. So, but he brought with that depth, he brought congressional experience, business experience. He dealt with the intelligence community beforehand. He had knockdown, drag out fights with George Tenet all the time, who was then the director of CIA.
Right.
So he brought a certain dimension to the Defense Department that commanded respect.
But Mike,
and
let me throw this at you because both Rummy and Powell were, on one side or the other, they had been deeply entrenched and ensconced in the system for a long time. They were, Powell was this military, a career military man. Rummy had been in the government for ages and ages. Is there any benefit to bringing this young, fresh blood like Hegseth, who has no strategic background? Is there any benefit to having somebody that guy's my age? He's 44 years old. He was, I don't know if he was even an officer, but
yeah, he was. He was a major in the Minnesota National Guard.
Is there any benefit to that though? Bringing somebody that's from the outside that only, we'll just say, relative to Colin Powell.
I hate to point out the comparison, but Hitler was only a corporal. Okay.
Although one of the first to get an Iron Cross, right?
Yeah, and he was regarded as a military genius in some respects. I'm not saying that to applaud him. I'm just saying that this was what he was regarded. That said, I think the young blood is going to be good if he can surround himself. If Hegseth can surround himself with people who have that strategic vision, it's people he can reach out and talk to for advice, like a McGregor, for example. McGregor is very, very sound. He's not well liked by anybody, but he is close to Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson allegedly is close to Trump, and I think that could be an influence there if McGregor is willing to do it. And that's going to be the other aspect. I thought personally McGregor might be on tap to be considered seriously.
I would have liked that.
Oh, it would have been quite different. And but his views would be opposed to what you hear today in terms of Israel in particular, and as well as but everyone seems to be coming around to the fact that on Ukraine, things have got to change dramatically because we can't go on the way we are, and we're pushing ourselves closer to a confrontation with Russia.
Before we got on air, Mike, I don't know if you saw the breaking news at about 10 o'clock this morning. Apparently, Olaf Schultz, and this is reported by Deutsche Welle, it's state media basically, so we can count on it being true, is that Olaf Schultz made a phone call to Vladimir Putin this morning. And
that was expected.
But Olaf Schultz, he is, publicly at least telling the press, I don't believe him, but he's telling the press that it was kind of, he was shaking his fist at Vladimir Putin. That's what the phone call was. I don't believe it, but that's what he's saying. I think diplomatically, what we're seeing here is their economy is on the ropes. His traffic light coalition is on the ropes. They're going to have the snap election come January, just as Trump gets inaugurated. Trump has already signaled that he wants an end to the Ukraine war. So This guy, Pete Hegseth, is going to have to go toe-to-toe with folks like Olaf Schultz and whoever Schultz puts into,
with Beerbach or whatever her name is.
She's the foreign minister.
Yeah, she's the one who basically said just the other day that they want to dip into pensions to pay for the Ukrainians. That's going to go over well with the German society, isn't it? German workers. When you have 3 Volkswagen plants, for example, shutting down because of EV competition from Germany. So the economy, as you point out, Manila, in Germany is on the ropes, and they cut themselves off from cheaper gas and oil.
Right.
And they don't have the industrial capacity to go into a wartime production. They have a consumer economy basically, and that's where it's been since the end of World War II. But to switch over to a war production economy, the German people do not want it. And Olaf Schultz is probably going to lose in the forthcoming elections. And I think that you're going to see the rise more of the AfD party, which is more far right and a more of a populist type of thing. But they are hurt. They are because of the deadline with Trump coming impending, coming on board on 20 January. These countries now are scrambling to lock in, and we're hearing that UK and France want to get Europe and the United States so committed into Ukraine before Trump comes on board that he's locked in and has no choice. And that's a non-starter. This is going to be the beginning of the end of NATO if that is to happen, and rightfully so. And you already hear Borrell, the EU Director General, whatever his title is, already talking about EU should be shifting or becoming more of a military alliance as well as an economic alliance, out of fear that NATO could be about ready to crack open. I would only add that what I see is that this is going to happen, and I think what you're going to see too is that many of these countries are going to become more what would you call it? For example, like the Scandinavian countries, more regional in terms of defense alliances. And in Africa, are centered around Morocco, more defensive alliances. These are major non-NATO partners to NATO, but I envision that this is what could happen, and the EU itself could become its own entity.
Michael, let me ask you about tattoos and military culture. I'm old enough to remember when the military wouldn't take recruits who had a lot of
really.
It was not permitted
I did not know
at
that.
all.
If they were showing.
Right. And so now, Hegseth apparently he was questioned by his commanding officers as possibly being a right-wing Christian nationalist extremist over a large tattoo on his chest called the Jerusalem Cross, which has been associated with Christian nationalism. It's a giant sort of medieval cross with smaller crosses sort of intermingled, which sort of look kind of like an abstracted iron cross, not quite the same, but it's a medieval thing, and it has references to the Crusades. It got him in trouble with his unit. I'm wondering, politically and just culturally, could that trip him up in his confirmation hearings? I mean, it might sound silly to question someone over their body art, but I mean, if there's an indication that this guy's been palling around with, right-wing extremists, I could imagine a few Republican votes in the Senate having a problem with that.
Well, I didn't realize that having a tattoo could be a disqualifying factor for public office. However, the Iron Cross that you portray, it is medieval, but it's also the flag of Georgia, country of Georgia.
Ah, that's true.
And it's
I doubt that's where he got it.
And it's deeply religious. It's deeply Christian, Eastern Orthodox in particular. He also has "We the People," and he has a target or something else on his. But I just think that's a superfluous argument for qualification. It's what he has up here, and how he's going to manage who he brings in as his assistants to guide him. Because of his inexperience, and I think he'll be the first to acknowledge he lacks that. But
what about his views?
Policy orientation.
For example, he has written that he opposes women in the military in general, and that he
said in combat,
particularly in combat. He didn't say in general, though.
He said in combat, and there is a distinction, and
but women are already in combat, right?
Yeah, but they're not. They're even though they have some training, they're not given that specialization. You don't see one woman in the SEALs, for example. You don't see them
right.
There's maybe one in the Rangers, and I don't know what her disposition is. Look, there is a physical difference, and that's just the way. That's reality. And when you're in a foxhole and you're fighting on the front lines, and you got to carry a 230-pound guy on your shoulders.
Right.
I think a woman's going to have a hard time with that.
But women have been in military, in very successful military in armies for the Red Army, they
were snipers.
Not in the foxhole, not like that though. Not to
not on the front line. I mean, you go back in history in the medieval times and even before Vikings, they had women who were archers. I mean, they're digging up remains today showing
Joan of Arc.
Women who had arch. They fought. They fought, but warfare was totally different back then.
These are exceptions, not the rule. The general rule, even like look at Tulsi Gabbard, right? She's a
lieutenant colonel, and she's been in combat.
And she's been in combat. She's tall, she's buff, she's a strong woman, like physically a strong woman. Even someone like her, I mean, she's much bigger than me. I think she's like 5'8" or 5'9". She's like a tall, big, buff, strong woman. Someone like her that can do burpees no problem all day is going to have a problem dragging somebody my husband's size, that's like 6 feet tall and 230 pounds out of if her brother is shot, right? Like and you saw all the backlash we saw with Volodymyr Zelensky, now nabbing women to go fight on the front line. You saw the backlash coming from that. So I think I actually agree with Pete Hegseth on that, because if I were the mom of one of these boys on the front line, I don't want my kid's life being dependent on some woke DEI ideology of saying women, we're all created equal. No, we are physically not created equal, because somebody my size should not be in the foxhole trying to drag a 6 foot tall, 230-pound man out of bleeding to death. It's just not going to happen. If I'm looking at it as a mom, I'm with him.
The Zelensky is actually mobilizing pregnant women as well. So this is bad news. The thing is that during World War II, the Russians had women in combat. They were snipers. In my personal experience, women make some of the best snipers in the world. We have women who are helicopter drivers who fly the F-15s and the F-35s. That's combat.
Senator Tammy Duckworth, she lost her legs from that.
She lost both legs.
Pilot.
But they're not in a foxhole. And I think that's the distinction maybe that Hegseth is trying to make.
Maybe not.
They're excellent. They can be excellent in to fill in, and others to release a guy to do these other things. because women, in my experience, are more, they pay closer attention to detail. They're much more precise. And in those kinds of disciplines, like a sniper, you need someone who's very level-headed and detailed, and can take that and send that round and do the job. During Desert Shield, Desert Storm, we had one woman reservist on our team, and we took her. We all one day went to Quantico to practice on the range. She outscored all the guys. And,
Wow.
But
the irony, she had never shot a rifle before.
Although the SecDef doesn't have to shoot anyone, right? He has to.
But this one has.
But I mean, this is an administrative job, right? I mean, you're drowning in paperwork. I'm reminded of Rumsfeld and his snowflake memos, they called it. And just like, so, I mean, does someone who is as young and does not have that kind of administrative experience like Pete Hegseth,
young with a lot of bravado,
but like,
well,
is he going to be able to
out,
handle that? Like, I
think
I don't
he
know.
can.
You know what I mean?
He's going to learn on the job. He's going to learn on the job. Secondly, you have the likes of, look, when Weinberger was in there, and I came in under Weinberger, he was the secretary of HHS, totally removed from the military. He was a lawyer, but he didn't have that military experience, but he turned out to be one of our best secretaries of defense. And during that time period, and he was highly regarded by then President Reagan as a result. So you see, Hegseth has the experience of the soldier, and and he does relate more to the combat veteran and to the people who walk in the Pentagon, some 23,000 of them who walk around the hallways every day, and he can relate to them. Because he's been one of them. That's right. That's critical. And he's got the smarts, and he can learn. And I think that if he surrounds himself with certain advisors who have that military depth or that strategic depth, I think that this is going to account for some. The only Secretary of Defense that I can recall who had strategic vision was Mattis. He was a military guy. He was a military general, Marine.
Right.
And I have the highest regard for him. And even though Trump didn't like him after a while, but he had the kind of thinking that Vladimir Putin has in terms of how to deal with the geostrategic, geopolitical world that we're going to be facing out there. And
3D chess, as they say.
Oh yeah, this past administration has been only reactive. You got to be 3 to 4 steps ahead in the future. That's why I think Trump is going to be a little more cautious in putting all of his marbles in one basket when supporting, let's say, a Netanyahu, for example.
Yeah.
Because he's also got to weigh what getting into war with Iran is going to mean with respect to possibly bringing in the likes of Russia and even China, and the fact that our policies of the past now have driven Russia and China closer together in a virtual military alliance. What does that mean for our ability to counter that? So I think he's got to really think twice. You got to cut. You got to measure twice and cut once.
Right. Yes. Well, Mike, let me ask you this, and then I also have a video I want to share with you guys about Elizabeth Warren reacting.
We also have a viewer question that we should
we do
pass along later. But go ahead.
Okay. So just real quickly, Mike, can you explain for us, because you were at the Pentagon for decades, how much latitude does the SecDef have? I mean, he doesn't act on his own, right? I mean, how much latitude does this job provide somebody like Hegseth? Is he just there to execute orders from POTUS?
I think this is probably going to be what happens, and also along with Gabbard and with Walls, he's going to bring a more of a military influence on defense, national security policy, as opposed to a State Department, because there has been that tug of war. You see with Austin versus Blinken. Blinken clearly has the lead, and you saw that in the when Afghanistan was evacuated. It was Blinken who was giving all of the orders and the direction when he was around, and it was not the Defense Department. And so this is going to change. I think that military background of all three, Gabbard, Walls, and Hegseth,
so
will make a major difference.
You think they'll complement each other? Well, not this Senator Elizabeth Warren. I just want to play a quick soundbite, about a minute, of her responding yesterday to these Trump picks, and I'd like for you to respond after. So have a listen to this.
On a colleague of yours who has been nominated, perhaps less controversially, in Senator Marco Rubio to be Secretary of State. Do you feel like he is qualified for the position?
So, look, there are many things I disagree with Marco Rubio on, and I haven't decided yet about voting for him, but he is qualified. He has experience. We may have differences that would cause me to say, I don't think that he should be Secretary of State. And we'll go through that. We'll listen to the hearings. I want to hear very carefully from him. But what we're talking about with people like Matt Gaetz is very different from what we're talking about with people like Marco Rubio. And we just have to keep that in mind. But do understand with Matt Gaetz, and you've already made this point, he's not the only one out there who is unqualified and who raises whole questions like Tulsi Gabbard does. You really want her to have all of the secrets of the United States and our defense intelligence agencies when she has so clearly been in Putin's pocket? That just has to be a hard no.
With no evidence, Senator Warren just says, Tulsi Gabbard as DNI, my vote is a hard no, without presenting any evidence free, that Tulsi Gabbard is a Russian asset. And that's what the mainstream media is putting out there. She's basically saying the only person she would approve of is Marco Rubio. The only thing I see there is that that's what she says, is that he's qualified. And I think, it's because he's part of the establishment, which she's showing her true colors. She is no far left, progressive, blah, blah, blah. She's full of shit. She is part of the establishment. She's ensconced and entrenched, and it shows. And now she's saying, well, Tulsi Gabbard will never get my vote. She's a Putin puppet. No evidence.
She also said she was an Assad puppet too.
Come on.
And it's like, honestly, if I were Tulsi Gabbard, I would have my defamation lawyer on speed dial over this sort of thing. She should sue her. She really should.
Well, I think she represents the Democrat strategy in the Senate. It's insidious, but the whole idea will be to make a blanket statement that all of these people, because they're unorthodox, are not qualified. Mm-hmm. But they do bring attributes to the position. What's her qualification to be senator? She lied about her own credentials to get a scholarship to Harvard, and what's her track record and effectiveness as a U.S. senator today? It's basically nil, and it's one in which the president has a right to his own choice. There was a mandate, and the president was elected. Trump was elected, and he's entitled to his own people. And you're always going to have these folks who are going to disagree only because they didn't win. That's basically what it boils down. And they're going to be they're going to obfuscate, and they're going to try to throw in obstacles. They're now a minority, and I wouldn't doubt that with a majority in the Senate that all of them are considered en blanc and they're summarily approved, and the Democrats are going to go nuts.
Well, there's going to be there's pushback already. Clearly, the Matt Gaetz appointment is not going to, you can't count to 50, I think, in the Senate. I don't think you can get there. But what Trump is asking the Senate to do is to take a long recess so he can push through a lot of recess appointments, effectively making it a rubber stamp situation, sort of like that would be the parliamentary procedure.
Yeah,
and
I
this is
don't
being
think that's
presented
going to
as
fly.
This is being sort of, we talked about Adolf Hitler earlier. His first major act towards dictatorship was something called the Enabling Act, which basically turned the Reichstag into a rubber stamp. Basically, anything that the Führer says automatically is passed through the Reichstag without having to have a vote. This law just sort of says it. This isn't that. But I think it's going to be viewed as like, this is that authoritarian thing that we in the liberal press were warning about.
Well, yeah, but when Biden was elected, he had all the people he wanted, and he had control of all of the House and Senate as well. So the trifecta was in his hands, but he didn't do anything with it.
Well, but Obama didn't get Merrick Garland as his Supreme Court pick, right? Because Mitch McConnell, ran out the clock.
True.
That's true.
But and Biden also had a trifecta when he was elected. It's what happened in the off elections that things begin to crumble. I think you got to give him a chance. There will be an opportunity to give him give Trump a grade in the by-elections in 2 years as to whether the nation approves or disapproves, and they can alter the composition of the House and Senate once again.
Yeah. Ted, did you say that there was a viewer
there
question?
was. Yeah, so here's the question. Is Trump and his team, or I should say, are Trump and his team strong enough to defeat the neoconservatives?
I would venture to say no. No. You already have one in there, and that is Rubio. Rubio is a neoconservative, and they can be either Republican or Democrat. This this vehement notion of anti-Russian, anti-Chinese is one in which this is music to the ears of the neocons. Mm-hmm. They want to push American democracy to the hilt, even to the point of putting it at the barrel of a gun. And I think that this is something very, very serious. I worked under neocons, and I saw it. We had the Iraqi war. Look what regime change brought us. And $9 trillion later, along with Afghanistan, we had nothing to show for it. Mm-hmm. And it was all neocon generated. And I know exactly what they were trying to do back in 2003. They wanted to take over Baghdad, use that as a hub, and from there have regime change in Damascus, then Tehran, mm-hmm. Libya, Saudi Arabia, all countries at that time that were giving Israel trouble. Everything in the Middle East was looked at through the prism of Israel. Yeah. That's got to change, but it's not changing in this administration. No. And the fact that there's backing Netanyahu 130%.
Although there's a counterfactual, right? There's a report today that Elon Musk met with the Iranian ambassador to the United Nations here in New York, presumably at the UN, at the Iran's UN mission, which I've actually visited. And so that would seem that there's interest in, thawing out relations to some point. I mean, obviously it's long overdue. It's been nearly half a century of sanctions and, hardly talking to each other.
As long as Trump leaves everything and the initiative in the hands of Netanyahu, as Biden has done, mm-hmm. All of these secret meetings with the Iranians isn't going to amount to anything. Netanyahu, between now and inauguration, this is our most dangerous period. Netanyahu, given what's going on internally in his own country and the fact that he knows that there could be an alteration after Trump is elected, he's probably going to try to make a move that on Iran that in a way forces us and locks us in, that we have no choice but to back him if we want to do that. I'm just hoping that the simmering underlying disagreement that Trump and Netanyahu have somehow can begin to have some impact in which Trump doesn't buy into Netanyahu 100% and starts giving some strategic thought to what he's saying. Because I can guarantee you, if Iran is attacked, it's going to bring in Russia and China. And also that we haven't discussed one thing, which is really going to be a major, major challenge to the Trump administration, and that is the rise of BRICS. Biden administration has had no response to it.
Mhm.
And you don't hear the mainstream talking about it. You don't hear in the discussions of these guys here wanting to come in, how they're going to deal with the rise of BRICS and the developing world to deal with de-dollarization. That can be just as serious as any military threat to our dollar, to our posture in the world. And we can't afford a three-front war. And we're already $35 trillion in the hole. How are we going to pay it off?
Doge.
We never will. We never will. That's the answer.
There you go. Yeah, Doge will deal with it, right?
Let Doge deal with it.
The Department of Government Efficiency, which is not even a department and is so efficient that it has two bosses.
Well, you know, they're not even going to be official, GS level employees, Ted, just so we clear this up. And Mike knows what I mean. They're not even like official. They're going to be more as like consultants. So this isn't even a real department. They're calling it that.
It's like when you bring in McKinsey. It's like that.
Yes.
And they write a report and no one reads it. And that's it.
I would raise another thing about that with no staffs. How's Tom Homan going to do his job? He's going to be a special advisor. I would have thought that at least he would have been would have headed Homeland Security, because then he'll have the troops. He has no military, he has no army, he has no staff. How is he going to make changes that he's calling for? How is he going to engage the military to do it?
Homeland is going to Kristi Noem, isn't it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But he's going to be a special advisor to the president. His position is only that as special advisor. He doesn't have any cabinet role.
Yeah.
And there's no discussion about where he's going to be placed. Is he going to be answerable to Noem? I don't know.
Yeah, he doesn't have a portfolio.
No, none.
Yeah.
None. So how is he going to implement the president's border policies? How's he going to come in? I'll tell you right now, DEA has published a chart, which I think is very, very significant. It already shows that the Mexican cartels have 6 families that are in 13 states, of which 5 of those states are distribution hubs throughout the country. Why aren't we taking them down?
I mean, what I'm hearing to answer your question about Honan is that there's really, to paraphrase Biden, nothing will fundamentally change, right? I mean, they're not sending the military to do the deportations. There's just having ICE do it. ICE's priorities are going to be the same list of wanted people, criminals, that the Biden administration ICE wants, and that's what they're focusing on. I mean, I would imagine in MAGA world, they're not going to be very happy by this time next year.
No, I think we need to hear more about implementation. We need to hear more about how they're going to actually make all of this work. I hear grandiose comments about what they want to do, but how are you going to do it, and what's going to be your time frame? They only have 2 years to really show change, and I don't think they can get organized in that period of time.
It's a big job.
Totally.
Well,
on all fronts.
All right, Michael.
We'll see.
Thanks so much
Always
for joining us.
appreciate you, Mike.
So
Thank
great.
you.
This was so enlightening. Really appreciate
you
joining us. So great. Please come back again soon. Michael Maloof is the person you just heard. He's the former senior security policy analyst at the Office of the Secretary of Defense. He has almost 30 years of federal service in the U.S. Defense Department as a specialized trainer for border guards and special forces as well in select nations of the Caucasus and Central Asia. My favorite part of the world.
Caucasus.
Caucasus.
See you guys.
Thank you, Mike.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Bye.